Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast exploring life-changing career moves. I'm your host, Brian Akar. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the bold decisions that transform their careers and lives. Let's dive in. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Why I Left. Today, we're diving into the story of Rachel Franco, a remarkable leader who has not only navigated complex organizational landscapes, but has also ignited innovation and effectiveness at every turn. Get ready to be inspired by the journey of someone who left a challenging work environment to create a path of impact and fulfillment. Let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. So our guest today is Rachel Franco, a dynamic learning and organizational development leader. She has a rich background that includes working with top-ranked global companies, and she has really developed a strong understanding of what drives individual and organizational performance and innovation. After spending her first part of her career in marketing and communications, Rachel transitioned into the learning and organizational development arena, where she currently helps foster a culture of innovation and build innovation capabilities and practice through high-impact talent development initiatives, coaching, and educational content. So in addition, Rachel's personal story of leaving a toxic job without a backup plan exemplifies her courage and resilience. And now her experience is also one that highlights the importance of leadership quality, organizational culture, and professional development opportunities in not only fostering innovation, but also effectiveness. So Rachel, welcome to the show. It's glad to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. Really
Absolutely.
excited to be here. Yes.
Yeah. And we met in the LinkedIn comments through a former guest of mine, or I think a former couple guests of mine. So I just love that these things kind of organically happen, right? I think something with Anna and Melina. And so we got connected there. You know, when people mention, hey, I left a job that was toxic, that's my own bat signal, right? To say, hey, are you interested? And so I'm glad that we got connected, and I'm looking forward.
I am too. You know, when I wrote that comment, who knew? It's at the wrong time, right? But who knew that it would lead to being on a podcast? So how exciting for, I guess, both of us. But I was really excited when you reached out.
Before we kind of get into it, I'd love to get some background on you, right? And so, can you talk to us a little bit about, your early career journey and really what led you to pursue like this dual focus in not only business on the MBA side, but also learning and organizational change?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I think first, maybe it ended up being a dual. I don't know if it ended up being a dual focus by accident. I would actually say maybe instead of it being a dual focus, it was really more sequential in a sense. So I started like I said, you said in the bio, I started my career in the whole marketing communications arena, specifically in advertising at Gray. It was Gray Advertising at the time, but I think it's now like Gray Global Group. And I thought advertising sounded interesting because I kind of liked consulting, but I didn't want to travel that much. And so I thought, well, advertising is a little bit like, I was in account management. So you're working with clients, right? And kind of determining what their strategy is and then helping to propose an advertising strategy and the like. And so I started out in advertising, but I did do a brief foray into learning and development. And it was largely inspired by some of that experience at Gray and just speaking about organizational culture that I found even then that I was starting to pay a lot more attention to the kind of the people side of things. There were a lot of closed doors toward the end of my stay at Gray from leadership, which was really leading to some morale issues and all that good stuff. And so I decided then to try and go over to learning and development. And I did spend about 1.5 years there at Deloitte. But it had always been a goal of mine to get my MBA. And I think back then, I guess I found that I missed being on the front lines of things. And so I decided I wanted to go back to marketing and thought the MBA would be a facilitator of that. And I mean, I guess marketing just appealed to me because I don't know. I think it just seemed more like it was a creative space versus like finance, or operations, and just dealt with strategy and the like. And so I got my MBA, and I decided, like I said, use it as a facilitator to go back into marketing, and did so. And a little bit of, again, some marketing strategy, and then worked at a B2B technology company doing marketing strategy and marketing management. And that was interesting, right? It was a relatively new startup that had headquarters in Paris, but headquartered here in the States in Atlanta. And so that was a lot of fun, just figuring out how are we going to get the word out, build the brand in a market with a lot of big players. And then I guess I won't be embarrassed to say this. They were going through some financial challenges. Actually, the CEO had just departed. I'll put departed in quotes. And then my position was eliminated because and then they actually ended up being acquired. But it ended up being one of the best things that happened to me. And so it's funny, your podcast is why I left. And we really leave for a variety of reasons, sometimes of our own choice, right? And sometimes of somebody else's choice. And sometimes whatever way it happened, it could be one of the best things that happens to you.
No,
Because I
absolutely.
was starting to have a little voice inside me that said, do I feel like marketing is my most natural, my most best skill? And I said, well, I've always been a great writer. You know what I mean? And content was starting to become big. And so I decided that I wanted to give my own business a go. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a push that I needed because I hadn't maybe been as happy there given some of the turmoil that the company had been in. And so I went into content development and communications for a good number of years, working with clients to, develop with their content development needs. And then I got another little voice inside of me at the end of I should also say I worked with executives a lot during that time, coaching them around their personal brand and helping them develop some of their marketing materials. But I would say about a good chunk into that, about 10 or 12 years, I got another little voice inside me that says, does my current path still make sense? And some of that was because I felt like, sadly, writing was getting a little bit commoditized. And I just also was thinking, well, I felt like I had maybe an income cap if I were to go, and I was wanting to go back in-house also after being on my own. And I did go back in-house for that position I described on LinkedIn. And that was part of what made me think like, is there going to be only limited income potential? And so I decided I wanted to get some coaching. Actually, I think that came after that position at the school, but I went back in-house at the school. And then after I left that's when I kind of did a lot of reflecting and got the coaching around reassessing and all that good stuff. And that's when I really made the career change, is after I had the experience of leaving.
No, that's
Of
awesome.
making that difficult decision to leave the school. So I hope I haven't done the tell me about yourself question in a while. So I hope.
Yeah, no, it's all good. And when you think about some of these experiences, how have these things really shaped your understanding of org culture and
Air
leadership
quoting.
as a whole?
Yeah, as a whole. I mean, I think, it's funny because I wrote in my graduate school essay for my second master's, which I did after, of course, I left that position at the school. The gist of what I wrote in the essay was that while I was in marketing, whether it was at the technology company, whether it was at Deloitte, whether it was at Gray, I really did find myself paying attention to what kind of leadership is in place here, what kind of communication is in place here, what kind of culture is in place here, and how are those things impacting performance and engagement. Because it's so simple that the more you invest in your employees, the more they'll give back to your company. But it's deceptively simple. And I found that the companies I was at, I didn't really feel like those elements were ideal or optimal. Like I mentioned at Gray, how there were, at least at that time, there were a lot of closed doors from leadership. And of course, that's going to lead you to believe like what's going on here, all that good stuff. And in fact, I think they did reorganize after I left. I think just in terms of culture, I think it comes down to people need to feel valued, right? Whether it's on the individual, they need to feel valued, right? And recognized and rewarded fairly for their contributions. And I think in terms of leadership, I think so much starts at the top, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could say everything starts out, even with what I'm doing now around innovation, right? If you don't have leadership buy-in and you don't have leadership support, it's really so hard to either create a good culture, whether it's a culture of innovation, or just a strong culture in general.
Yeah.
I think so much of it starts with leadership, even though not to say there can't be anything bottom up, but I just think, right. So to me, that's why I was always so passionate about leaders, right? Because they really can make or break not only your individual experience in your role, but also just the cultural experience that you have at the company.
No, that makes a
So I
lot of
think it was
sense.
just really more observing what was in place, what wasn't in place. And, I think that all culture or leaders or all those things ultimately determine, are you happy coming to work, right? And if you're happy coming to work, you're going to probably put more effort in and be more engaged in all that good stuff.
Yeah, no,
And
definitely.
so in the simplest of terms, that's really right. In my mind, what it kind of comes down to.
No, I love that. And so I mentioned earlier how we got connected, right, in that
Yeah.
LinkedIn post. And you talk about how you left a position only 4 months
Yes.
due to this kind of toxic leadership environment. So can you
Yeah.
walk us through the factors that really led to that decision and how it impacted you personally and
Yes.
professionally?
It was and as I mentioned in the LinkedIn post, it was probably one of the hardest decisions that I made in my life. But In terms of some of the factors, I mean, one big thing was, and I guess this may be still rooted with the leader, is I guess I'll use the word. It was a little bit of one. It was a bait and switch. The position was advertised one way, and I think we all sometimes understand that you might either get additional responsibilities or things might change, but when it's one thing and then it just completely ends up being something different. So I found out later from my colleague that my then manager had said, "Oh, just put something together. We'll figure out what they're going to do later." And that was such a affront to my personal sense of integrity. You know what I mean? That to have that much of a disregard for someone's livelihood in a sense, right? It really did come down to the factors were probably the leader and the role just ending up not being a fit, and the leader also, the manager. And I know how they say sometimes you're never supposed to, bash a former manager, but I think it's testimony to my probably being somewhat correct that the whole team has since left. I think between that and feeling really, just that was such an affront to my sense of integrity that I just something I would not do. And then, what do you go? Oh, and then I felt like she just wasn't able to innovate. Like I remember when I wanted to make a newsletter better, it was as simple as wanting to add a more creative headline, and she would not let me do that. And I'm the kind of person where I'm very entrepreneurial, I'm very creative. And so she was just very limiting, if that makes sense. Limiting in terms of, here I was not some entry level, not that there's bad about entry level, but I had skills and experience to bring. And I just felt like she really wasn't letting me kind of leverage my skill set fully.
No, that makes sense. And when you think about that, right? So now you leave this position, it was kind of challenging. How did you then navigate that next transition? And what were some key steps?
I will say, first of all, just even in terms of the decision to leave, because I think a lot of other people might relate to this, especially, I think I saw a little bit of that in the comments, that I was just so miserable. When it starts spilling over into your whole life, right? It becomes this cycle of just dread, having to go back to the office the next day and then on the weekends. So I just wanted to convey that it wasn't like it was just a flippant, like, I'm just not happy, I'm going to leave. And I was so miserable. And I think another factor is when a positioning is so bad that it starts seriously, and not to the point of a mental illness, but it starts impacting your mental health. That's when I just knew that I just can't live like this. I can't live like this anymore. So I did make the very difficult decision to leave. And how did I did line up one of my former contract gigs, the one where I was working with executives. So I had lined that up before I left. And so that gave me a little bit of breathing room, I guess, in some ways, without just leaving without anything. It gave me a little breathing room to kind of think about what I wanted my next step to be. And I continued to do that for a little while, maybe not initially knowing that I wanted to make a career change yet. But again, I guess how I tend to be is I'm a deep, very introspective person. And I was just, like I said, that's when those questions started coming into my mind about, maybe that started a little bit before that position, but I think it definitely, accelerated about, does my current path make sense for all the reasons I cited before?
Right.
And so, speaking of LinkedIn, serendipitously, when I feel like I've gotten to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm not figuring this out, I've got the question and I've got a lot of consternation, which can be uncomfortable, but that's usually where the change starts, right? But I felt like I'm not figuring this out on my own. I think I need to get some coaching. I love coaching, as you can tell. I love getting coaching and I love being a coach. So I think I want to get some help with this. And serendipitously with LinkedIn, someone posted on a post, and maybe they posted right after me, or I posted right after. And she was a coach that it wasn't like job search, but she helped you figure out what you wanted to do next.
That's cool.
Well, that's serendipitous.
That's what you got to love about the platform, right?
Yeah.
Like it's those type of organic connections that just happen.
Yeah, obviously I'm like, how could I not reach out to her? So I reached out to her and kind of, explained where, where I was. And we started working together. And I think I took the Gallup the Clifton Strengths Finders. And then I did some other assessments that she had me do, like something around, your values, your mission, your purpose, and your motivating. I love this, motivating skills and burnout skills. I love that term, burnout skills. It's not that you're not good at it, but it burns you out because you don't like it. And that was for me a really great reframe. Sometimes you can think that, right? Because I, don't like this or whatever, I'm not good at it, but it's just maybe a burnout skill. So focusing more on those motivational skills or motivating skills. But anyway, I did a lot of stuff like that. And then she took all that and analyzed it and came back with a few suggested areas. Okay. And one of the areas was organizational development. And I said, well, that's really interesting because way back at the beginning of my career, right? I did a brief foray into learning and development, but at the time it wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right fit. And what have you. And I'm not sure companies were taking it as seriously back then. And I'm getting maybe the impression that they're starting to think about those kinds of things, whether it's learning, talent development, and all that good stuff now. And then I went and had about 10 or 15 conversations with people in the field, just to find out, like, what are you doing to make sure do I want to make a change? Do I not want to make a change? And do I want to make a change in this? So I had about 10 or 15 conversations with people and decided that, and this is probably about a year-long process, to be quite honest, and all of this. It wasn't quick. It was, I did a lot of research and a lot of what have you. So I had those conversations. I'd meet with my coach. We would debrief and all that good stuff, and decided I did want to make the change. And then also decided that I think I might want to get a master's in this area, because I had two family friends who were in this arena. One got their master's, one didn't. And I knew the one who didn't always regretted and felt that had held her back. So then I researched graduate schools and ended up having even more conversations about the different graduate schools. And then I took all that information. I think it was around October of 2017, something like that. Yeah. And I went traveling out of the country, and I just used that time to really reflect, okay, do I really want to do this? It was going to involve moving to a new city. I had kind of not been as happy in Atlanta, but still was going to be leaving my family and all of that. And I'm very close with my parents. So I just did a lot of thinking. And I think it was about a month or two later that I decided, okay, I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to do it. And so then I applied to Northwest. I applied to 5 schools, actually, and I got into all but one. And I decided to go to Northwestern. And so, I moved to Chicago and got my second master's, second and final, I should say.
Very good. Very good. And so now you're coach yourself, how do you leverage kind of your own emotional intelligence and intuition to really foster personal and professional growth in the people that you actually coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would throw another word in there. Yes, emotional intelligence, but I'd also throw empathy in there. And I've always been an empath and had natural empathy from when I was a child. And also, I would say it's also through asking a lot of questions. So I think it's probably a combination of EI, empathy, and active listening, and curiosity. I should throw that in. That really kind of allow me to, I think it's really allowed me to learn about somebody else and where they're at and where they're trying to go. And really kind of quickly processing all that and either asking them. I like to call myself a coach consultant, actually. So the coach might be, helping them figure out what's already the answers within themselves. But the consultant in me will offer up some ideas, suggestions, strategies, because that's always the kind of coach I was looking for. So that's the kind of coach I like to be and want to be. So I think it's really those factors that I use to really, one, make somebody feel really comfortable, because if somebody's not comfortable, they're not going to open up and really probably be able to be coached. And then just to learn about where they're at and where they want to go, and either ask more questions and then offer some ideas and suggestions as to how they might get to where they want to go, whether that's growing in a certain way, whether that's this or that.
No, I love that. And now let's talk a little bit about, as a coach, obviously people love to hear about results, right? And so can you maybe provide a specific example of, let's say, like a complex business challenge you helped solve with this multidisciplinary approach, and really the impact that it had on the organization or the individual?
I mean, it's funny. I kind of feel like on a macro level, everything I just say my team and I, because we're a very collaborative team. I mean, I think right now my company where I'm at, because it's funny, when I think back to my past life, it's been so long now. I was thinking about this question I knew you were probably going to ask. I'm like, it feels like a whole nother world now before pre-graduate school. But I think just as on a macro level, I think the main business challenge that my team and I are trying to address is, how do we foster a culture of innovation, and how do we build innovation practice and skill set in the company? And so everything we do, whether it's a learning program or our coaching, is really in support of that business challenge in a sense. It's funny, we've been acquired, so I can't give I don't know if I can give current results because we're so newly into this new company, but I can use a specific example before the acquisition. And it's funny, I was hesitant. It's probably it's a little bit more of a marketing example, but it was a great accomplishment, I guess, for me personally. That the CEO of then Change Healthcare came to my team and wanted, I think the first quarter, he wanted 75% of employees in the company to complete one of our learning programs And then by the second quarter, I think he wanted like experts, like, another 25%, and the third quarter, another 10% or something like that. So that was something I led. And I don't know, in terms of my dual thing focus, I mean, I think whether it's a learning program, whether it's a marketing program, you're really kind of in terms of strategy, it's thinking about, well, where, who am I trying to reach? What are my objectives? Who am I trying to reach? And how am I going to reach them? And then of course there's a communications component. How am I going to promote what I'm doing as well? Right. Cause all that good stuff. But, so I developed, or I conceived, the innovation framework summer, or that was the name of our program, Summer Olympics, because the Tokyo Olympics was happening. So I thought, well, let's piggyback off of that and do an enterprise-wide competition by business unit and have them, compete to see who can complete this learning first. Yeah, it went on for about 3 months, and my initiative exceeded the CEO's goal. I think I got like 80% versus 75% 2 months ahead of schedule. So I don't know if that was a great story, because I just joined the company too. So that was a great story. But I lend that because I think that's kind of what I do. I'll take something. If you come to me with a mission or a problem or a challenge, I'll let it marinate in my mind, and then I'll come up with something really creative and effective. Right? It was not only creative, but it also worked.
Yeah, and that's key. That's key that it actually worked.
It can't be creative. It has to. Right. It has to obviously work and have a I mean, absolutely. I did that again when we wanted to launch a new community, and I came up with this whole thing around DT Palooza, Design Thinking Palooza, take off of Lollapalooza.
Yeah.
It was kind of this week-long learning festival.
That's cool.
That was going to introduce people to our community and all that good stuff. So we got like 95% satisfaction scores on the learnings and what have you.
I love that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, those are a few details, but yeah, I mean, smaller. But everything my team does is around the business challenge of how do we foster a culture of innovation and build innovation mindset and practice and skill set.
Yeah. So when you think about that current role, you talk about, so sounds like you get a great chance to ideate and innovate and do all these things.
Yes.
What are some of the most rewarding aspects of your work? And really, how do you measure, I heard some stats there, but how do you measure success when it comes to org development and capability building?
Let's say, well, I'll answer the easiest part first in terms of what's most satisfying, to say what's most satisfying about the role. Well, one thing I'll circle back to is that I have a much better leader or manager right now. I mean,
that's important. That's a big thing. That's a big thing.
Yeah. Yes. And she's so much the opposite of that other one. But she's, I think, just based on what we do in terms of innovation, like, she wouldn't be a good fit for being a leader in innovation if she would not let her direct reports innovate and have a lot of white space to create. And she's really wonderful in that regard. So I think I have a great manager. I think she's also the one person I've ever worked with where she lets me probably say sometimes things I shouldn't say. We have a very open, very comfortable and honest relationship, that's good. Great. I mean, sometimes it's just a great, no leader's perfect, but she's pretty strong. So I think I have a great leader who, lets us, I say us because my colleagues too, lets us experiment. And if we fail, she treats it as learning, not blaming or shaming. I'm actually giving a presentation about that next week. But she really walks the talk there. And then, I think innovation is just really interesting and fun. I don't even know if I can explain why it's interesting and fun. It's just a really fulfilling and compelling and interesting area to work in. And it's funny, like, I don't know if I could do a traditional L&D role, or, where you're just dealing with like regular soft skills. It's so interesting to me, like really helping people be innovative in their roles. That's what I like to say I do. I help leaders and non-leaders alike be more innovative in their roles. And how could that not be fun and exciting?
No, I love that. Well, in
terms of metrics, we're always working on, how can we either improve our metrics, or how do you measure? I think we need to actually probably somewhat continue to do a better job in that, quite honestly. But in terms of our learning programs, because that's, I'll say two things. In terms of the learning programs, we're using some of the typical, learning metrics in terms of, did I learn something new, satisfaction, NPI, what have you. What the program we're doing now, our goal is to do a better job of after, like, not only are they applying, so we do try and measure, are they applying the skills after they've come to a program? And then with a particular program, as part of the program, they've come up with concepts, like ideas that could actually grow, help become a product or a solution. So we do want to see if we can figure out a way to track, well, how many of the ideas that were conceived in this program actually turned into revenue producing solutions for the company. So we hope to kind of work that metric in. We're a small and lean team, But so, I mean, those are some of the general metrics, but there are also some of those metrics that we're trying to get on a more businessy level, if you will.
No, that makes sense. Now, I'd love to get some advice from you, right? And the advice section of this is something that really gets a lot of good traction.
Yeah.
So when you think about, professionals, right? What advice would you give them who find themselves in their own toxic work environments, especially when they're considering a career transition without a safety net? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's, so one piece of advice I was going to say, if you can leave, try and leave. I don't know if this is a perfect way of stating it, but maybe try and leave intelligently. You know what I mean? And I don't know if I would have been prepared to leave had I not. I think I would have anyway, had I not been able to line up my contract gig again. I was so miserable that I probably would have made the decision to leave anyway. But I was able to get that going before I left. So I would say to people, if there's, if you're so miserable and you absolutely can't stay, and I mean, everybody has to know their own financial situation, obviously. So you have to, everyone's got to make their own decision. But if you can leave intelligently, like I would, like I feel like I did, if you have something, you can even part-time line something up before just leaving cold, even if it is just a gap filler, something to fill the gap until you figure out the next step. I think that's always a good way of approaching it. So if you can, maybe there's a way to line up, maybe you like the work you're doing, but you don't like the culture. Is there a way you can line up something on a contract basis to do so that you're not just leaving without anything?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So that's kind of how that's what I was fortunate that I had my contract gig before that I could bring back alive. So luckily they were still open to having me back. But if one can do that, I think it does make the leaving obviously a little bit easier. But sometimes I will say that you're so miserable that I think even if I had not had that, I probably would have left anyway. And what would I have done? I guess I would have had to probably find something part-time at least part-time to sustain myself, right? While I was figuring out my next step. But I think it depends on how unhappy you are, right? No. Where, if you're just a little bit unhappy and, can stick it out till you find something else full-time, then maybe you should stay. But if you're so miserable like I was, it was just spilling over into my whole life. I had to leave, but Absolutely. I feel like I left intelligently. So I guess that would be my one piece of advice. If you could kind of try and quote unquote leave intelligently, try and do that. I think even as you're feeling like you're unhappy, can you, even before you might make the decision to leave, maybe start networking even before, so I'm starting to feel miserable, but also, the more action you can take towards making a change, sometimes will make you feel a little bit better about your current situation. So you might be miserable in your current situation, but I find if I'm at least taking action towards what I want to do, kind of helps offset that unhappiness a little bit. Yeah. So I think those are just two quick tidbits I would throw out there.
No, without a doubt. And now we'd love to kind of look ahead to, what's next for Rachel, right?
What's next for
so
Rachel?
what impact do you hope to make in the field of not only org development and capability building, but what are you looking at long-term wise, fostering innovation and effectiveness? What's next for you?
Yes, well, I don't know if my manager will ever watch this, but I am. No, she does know I have a passion for coaching. In terms of my impact on org development or innovation or learning in org innovation, it's funny for where I am in my career. I hate to say I'm not maintaining. I want to continue to, help other people grow. Mm-hmm. I used to do a blog called Be Yourself and the Rest Will Follow, and it was around helping people grow. And I think that's the theme of my life. I love to help people grow. So if it's helping them be more innovative, then I'd like to continue to be able to help them be more innovative so that they can create great results for themselves. And for the company that obviously that they're working in. So I think it's in terms of that, but I do have a great passion for coaching. So longer term, and I'm also getting toward, I'm not retiring yet, but I am getting toward that latter stage of my career. So, if you had asked me that question 10 years ago, my answer might have been like, I want to continue to, I might, be in corporate for the next X. And I don't know that yet. I don't know, but I'm getting to the latter stages of my career and I do have a passion for coaching. So I definitely can see myself wanting to launch and grow a coaching practice. I don't know that it would focus around innovation or learning, and I'm still trying to figure out my niche. I know I want to have a coaching practice that's anchored somewhere in the professional arena, whether it's coaching leaders to be more self-aware. Because I think when you know yourself better, you can better lead. or some other area. And then I also want to coach something around in the kind of the personal area. I don't know if it's something around, helping people, not job, but people who are in midlife and are trying to figure out what's next. And I don't know if that's something, so it's broader than just, what's my next job, but what is my what's next? What is in this next chapter of my life? What does that look like? So I don't know, I'm playing with all these different areas and what have you. I have a passion around learning from failure. So I don't know if that's an area I'd want to coach leaders around. How do you foster a culture that does allow for learning from failure? So it's kind of in that very early stages of where I'm ruminating a lot. It's funny. My brother was telling me the other day, he's like, a mentor of mine used to say, you should do something different every 10 years.
I like that.
Right. And I'm like, if I think about my life, I think it probably has been. Maybe for me, I'm a deeply very introspective. For me, I think it's more like 7, but maybe it's 7 to 10, I'll say.
Yeah. For me, it's around every 3 to 4.
Yeah.
Every 3 to 4.
If I was being honest, I'd be like, yeah, probably a little bit more. I like variety and I'm always learning. I think, I feel like maybe you're like this too. I feel like I'm a lifelong learner.
Yes.
And it's funny, I had to cite what my superpower was the other day. And I said, I think my superpower is really my curiosity. And I wonder if I can remember this quote, because I'll get curious about something. And I say somewhat too, my career was driven by my curiosity. I had a question about something and I wanted to learn about it. And then I went to explore it, but that life, I think it was Brian Grazer, a movie producer, said, life is not about finding the answers, but asking the right questions or something like that. And I think so much of life starts with asking a question. And right now I'm asking a question around, how can I make coaching a bigger part of my work life? And what does that look like? And so right now I'm in the question stage. I don't have all the answers, but it's in this, right? It's in asking these questions that I'm figuring out. And I've just hired a new coach, by the way, to help me figure this out.
Good. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat too. I asking myself some questions here. I found like a nice purpose professionally, obviously with the show too. And so it's almost like what's next for me, right? And so I think about those things a lot. So I love that you said that.
Yeah.
And so the next question is, I'm kind of flipping the mic a little bit. Is a question for me. It's a question for me.
I was thinking about this, Brian. I've been so busy at work. I didn't have a chance to think about this.
All good. So we can skip that one if you don't have anything for me. All good.
I felt badly because I was like, oh my God, my mind was a blank. And then in my frazzled morning,
all good.
I don't know if I can come up with something on the spot.
No. It's okay. I definitely don't want you to have to rush there. So, but what I would like you to do is, one, I really do appreciate you coming on the show, hearing your story, making the comment. I think it was Anna's post that started it, or I can't remember who started it, but both of them were chiming in. But where can our listeners find you and support you?
Oh, well, I mean, they can go. I wish I had that coaching practice started yet, but I don't. They can go to my LinkedIn profile.
Well, I want to thank you for that info. Appreciate you coming on the show. And look, I'll share all of your information in the show notes. So I hope you all have a great week, and we'll definitely see you next time. Rachel, thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Why I Left. Join us next time for more inspiring stories about growth, resilience, and transformation. Visit us online at www.whyileft.co. That's whyileft.co. And subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Alive Podcast Network. See you soon.